everyone, my name is Katie and welcome to my channel, Katie's Book Nook. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 most underrated book to TV show adaptations. So many times books are getting turned into movies and TV shows, and for the longest time I based my TBR on what adaptation was coming out. So I would look and see just like different trailers for different movies and TV shows, and that's how I discovered what books I wanted to read, you know, before I discovered BookTube and all of the wonderful series that I was missing out on. So basically all throughout 2016 and 2017 I read books based on what sort of adaptation was coming out, and then I would watch the TV show after reading the book. So because of that, I have many book to TV show adaptations that I love. I obviously have not read and watched all of them that are out there because there are so many, but these are fairly recent and they are 5 that I really enjoyed, and I would recommend both the book and the TV show. So today I'll be talking about what the book is about and how the TV show maybe is different and how they compare to each other. And I'll be going in order of ranking from 5, 4, 3, 2, and top number 1. So at number 5, we have American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This story follows Shadow, a young man who is released from prison a few days after his wife and best friend are killed in a car accident. He is then enlisted by the mysterious Mr. Wednesday to be his bodyguard and errand boy. Mr. Wednesday is a very eccentric and bizarre character, and soon Shadow finds himself drawn into this world of the mysterious American gods. Basically, the principle is anytime a group of people believes in a god or a figure, that manifests into an actual person. And so in America, where there is a blend of many different belief systems throughout all of time, you have a huge conglomeration of different American gods, and so Shadow finds himself drawn into this world, and we meet many characters from different cultures, but there's a war brewing between the old gods of the olden days and the new gods of today's society, mainly being technology. So this book is a Neil Gaiman book. If you know anything about Neil Gaiman, you know he has these very dark, atmospheric, kind of like weird books, and this book was no exception. It was very strange in the way that things were explained. It's really almost like an homage to America, and it really paints a very creepy image of some of like the sleepy American towns. One of the things I really liked about this book is the philosophy of each faith manifesting into like an actual being, and just how in America there were so many different ones from the different belief systems that were brought over. And this book highlights belief systems that are maybe it's not just the popular ones, but like a wide variety from like little smaller sections of religion. I do think that some of the storylines, the way that they were like explained in here, didn't like make sense to me. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but just sometimes the characters' actions didn't necessarily match what we were told about them, or there wasn't enough of like a motivation as to why a character was doing what they were doing. And I thought that the TV show was really good because it kind of filled in the gaps for the characters. There's a character named Laura, and I'm not going to do much more, but just say her name is Laura, and I think that the TV show really did a good job of showing the kind of filling in the gaps in her character arc, and her actions then made much more sense with what they showed on screen. I also think the TV show has really great cinematic detail. It's on Stars, and I think the thing I really like about the TV show also is just like the cinematic details, and with each different god they're able to go back into their story and kind of show their origin stories, and I thought that was a really cool aspect that you maybe didn't get in the book. And though some of them were like animated, and the way that they would change the lighting and the color palette to show kind of like the origin stories of these different figures was really cool. I found the show just really fascinating to watch. So if you're into dark, weird, cool, different dramas, I would definitely recommend giving American Gods a try. It is on Stars, and I believe the 2nd season is coming out soon. Coming in at number 4 on my list is Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. This is a series on Netflix. So in 1843, Grace Marks is convicted of murdering her employer and his housekeeper slash mistress in a very vicious fashion. She's found guilty and is serving a life sentence. However, she claims to have no memories of the crimes. Some people believe her innocent, and while others think she's certifiably insane. 15 years after the crime is committed, an up-and-coming psychologist thinks that he can dig into her mind and unlock the secrets of her past. But is Grace really as innocent as she claims to be? I am a fan of Margaret Atwood's writing. I think she has a really good way of making you think, and she has a lot of feminist themes in her writing, and especially in this book, it talks a lot about like the treatment of women, especially someone that's notorious for doing a crime. Like there's a passage in here about like what it means to be a murderess instead of a murderer, which was really, really well written and cool. Margaret Atwood adapts her writing style based on what kind of book that she's writing. So because this one takes place in the 1800s, she adapts her writing style to have it read more like a traditional classic book that would have been written in that time period, which I think is a really cool skill and does more to immerse you in that like Victorian setting of the book. And this is definitely a thriller. I finished this book and I was thinking about it for days because you really come away with it like just thinking a lot about what it means to be a woman in that time period and like what people believe about you or like what you can make them believe. Like I don't know, it was just so thrilling and really, really cool. And the TV show was on Netflix and it was, I guess, just a mini series. I really enjoyed the way that they portrayed it in the TV show. I would say I'd rank the book and the TV show pretty equally. I think they did a good job of adapting it. The way I think that they portrayed it in the TV show leaves a little bit less room for questions. I think that they tried, of the two possible outcomes that it could be, I think they tried to steer the viewer in one direction more than the other, whereas the book leaves it more open-ended. So I'm not sure if I was a fan of that or not, but I do appreciate that they were trying to explain. If you're a fan of historical fiction thrillers with feminist themes, I would totally recommend checking out this book and watching the series. The book coming in at number 3 is Big Little Lies by Leanne Mortieri. So, a parent turns up dead in a sleepy oceanside town where PTA moms are the most vicious of all. We follow Madeline, who's funny and biting and a force to be reckoned with, Celeste, a beautiful housewife who seems to have it all, and Jane, a young single mom who's new to town and has a sad and mysterious past. These women find themselves at a crossroad in this thriller that examines how schoolyard scandals and gossiping soccer moms can turn deadly. So this book was a lot of fun. I remember I read it, I was in school, and I wanted to watch a TV show, and I read it in like one sitting. I got home from an exam and I was like, I don't want to look at any other work. I sat down on the couch for 5 hours straight. I did not move from my seat until I finished this book because it's just so engrossing and you just need to know what happened. It's not anything like super out there or like super outlandish, which makes it a little bit more realistic. And I think that that is really kind of what pulls the reader in, is just that like this is something that you believe could actually happen. It's kind of terrifying, but it's also really interesting to see the dynamics between the different moms and their kids and like how what the parents are doing have an effect on their young children. And yeah, I thought it was really, really engrossing. But I have to say, I think I almost like the TV show better because it has Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon and Shailene Woodley in it and so many great actresses. And the way that they bring these characters to life is like they just do such a good job of it. And I think that they bring the character development and the character arcs to kind of like elevate another level above the book, just because they are all such phenomenal actresses. The way the series handles the mystery of who has died and like the way that it slowly unfurls is just keeps you on the edge of your seat. This is a show on HBO and I'm pretty sure my roommate and I watched this in a weekend because there's only, I think, about 6 episodes, and we started it and then we're like, all right, let's buckle down. We don't want to do any work today, and we just procrastinated all day by watching the TV show together, and it was a really good time, and it was just a very, very good thriller. I don't tend to go for thrillers that often, but this one was really, really good and I enjoyed it. So if you're a fan of thrillers, definitely check out this book and the TV show. Coming in at the number 2 spot is The White Queen and its follow-up miniseries, The White Princess. This story takes place in medieval England following Elizabeth Woodville, a beautiful and ambitious woman who claws her way up to royalty and eventually becoming queen. She fights tooth and nail to establish her family's dominance. However, she's become part of one of history's greatest mysteries. Her two sons become the lost princes of the Tower of London. The series The White Queen is on Starz, and this series also follows the two books The Kingmaker's Daughter, about the frail Anne Neville who marries Richard III, and The Red Queen, which follows Margaret Beaufort, who is the mother of Henry Tudor. I would say if you want to watch a TV show, it's really only necessary to read The White Queen. I thought that this book was way better than The Red Queen or The Kingmaker's Daughter, because the events that happen in those two books, while they are from the perspective of the woman that they are about, and it goes more in depth into their life story, it's mentioned enough in The White Queen that it almost feels very repetitive to read those two other books. So I read them, but I don't necessarily recommend that you need to read them, and The White Queen is definitely the best of these books. Elizabeth Woodville is just a force to be reckoned with. All these stories are based on real life historical figures, and I think that these women were really powerful and really turned the tide of events in English history, and yet they're not talked about as much as maybe some other famous historical figures. And so I really enjoyed learning about their stories, and the way that Philippa Gregory has a lot of historical fiction novels, and basically the way that they work is they're based on fact, but then she writes them like a fiction novel and kind of extrapolates. So while they're based on real life events, it is a work of fiction, and she embellishes it a lot. However, I thought that this was so thrilling, and it was really, really cool to read about the way that Elizabeth Woodville kind of manipulates her way onto the English throne, and just the way that the politics worked. It's so intriguing, and I am a sucker for a good historical fiction show, and I loved the show. I thought that, because sometimes it's confusing with a bunch of the different characters and different historical figures and stuff that are talked about, but then in the show it really gives it more like a face to the name, and it was just really good. But however, I will say, I know sometimes historical dramas can be boring, but the show was not boring at all. As much drama and stuff that goes on in fantasy novels in their courts, it is nothing compared to what went down in medieval England. People really were ruthless. It is insane. And just the fact reading this and knowing that this is stuff that actually happened is crazy. So, The White Princess follows Elizabeth of York, who is Elizabeth Woodville's daughter, and she ends up marrying Henry Tudor to end the War of the Roses and unite the two bickering royal families. However, she is in love with someone else, and Henry Tudor becomes increasingly paranoid as he fights to keep control of the English crown. And she is the mother of a rather famous historical figure you may know as Henry VIII, the one that had many, many wives. So that's kind of where this fits into English history. Again, I thought that this TV series on Starz was very similar in the vein of The White Queen, where you see a lot of the court manipulations and the different things that are going on, and it was just really, really interesting to watch. And I definitely recommend, if you are into historical fiction at all, give these books a read, because it is really cool to learn about a historical figure that maybe doesn't get the spotlight as much. And coming in at my #1 book to TV show adaptation, we have Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. So in this series, we have Outlander, Dragonfly in Amber, Voyager, The Drums of Autumn, The Fiery Cross, A Breath of Snow and Ashes, An Echo in the Bone, and Written in My Heart's Own Blood, and there are to be more. I think the next one is Go Tell the Bees That I'm Gone, and no one knows if this series, if that's actually going to be the last book or if there's going to be many more books. There are also some novellas out, I believe. There's a short story collection that I need to get my hands on. So in this book, we follow Claire Randall, who in 1945 is on a honeymoon with her husband post-World War II in the Scottish Highlands. She was a World War II nurse. While on this honeymoon, she walks through a standing stone to another time, and she is transported to 1743 Scottish Highlands, a time of brutal clansmen and a warrior people. As she uses her wits and cunning to survive in the time of the Scottish clans, she soon finds herself torn between two men and two different times. Okay, Outlander is on Starz, and it's probably one of my favorite shows on TV right now. I do have to say this is more of an adult romance, historical fiction novel, and is a little bit dense to get through, and there are many, many books in the series, but I read them all. I just love Claire and Jamie as characters, and their romance is just amazing. Like I heard one time it was described as, it's not a romance, it's a lifelong love story, because all these books span many, many years, and it is just so great. There's such a wide cast of characters, and you can tell that a lot of history and research goes into making each and every one of these books, and not just research on the historical events and like what they're wearing, what they're doing, but also, since Claire is a nurse, she has a really wide base of knowledge on medicinal herbs. That's kind of what she uses to survive in this 1700s time healer, and she's just obviously very smart and resourceful. However, even though this is my #1 series, I think this is the one that I have the most criticisms of, which may seem counterproductive, but the issue with this book is the series is that it has no overarching plot. It just kind of follows their lives. I would say the first 3 books, or the first 2 books, 2 to 3 books, have like more of a plot, and then from there on it kind of just like goes into following their lives. And another thing is the fantasy elements are only used when it is suited to move the story along. So like the time travel aspect was really only invented so that someone like Claire, who is like a true like modern woman, could be planted into that past time period. And Diana Gabaldon has talked about this, how she wanted a character like Claire who was smart and, you know, talked back and all that stuff, and how women really weren't raised like that in that time period, so that's why she used time travel. And it sometimes like disappears in later book, like it's just not important to the overall plot. Like there is no like overall goal or thing that they're working towards, and it is more of like following in their lives. But I mean, the little mini plots and things that happen in their lives are really interesting to follow along with. And so I have to say that I think Outlander is the strongest book, and each book kind of goes downhill a little bit. However, I think the way that they are written is really, really well suited to television. And I think that they're written like a television show where you're just following along in their adventures and their lives, and there doesn't have to be an overall like plot for the entire series. It's just each season kind of has its own arc, which is kind of how the books work. So I do think that that's why this TV show is so fantastic, because the books are written in a way that they make for good TV. However, I still do recommend the books, or if you want to get into the TV show, I definitely recommend at least reading this first book and then moving on to the TV show. And then you don't necessarily have to read the books after that. You can if you want to. Each season follows each book, and I think they are currently on track. They have at least through season 6 that they're renewed for. So they're going through at least A Broth of Snow and Ashes. So that's really exciting. The atmosphere of the Scottish Highlands and the time period of the 1740s, it's just so well done. And I just absolutely adore this series, though I may gripe about it sometimes. Especially me and Melissa, we like to talk about it, about like, oh yes, I read a 20-page description on some herbs that Claire was finding in the woods or something, but it's still so good. And I think you can be critical of things that you love and still love them. And as critical as I am with the books, I have many, many less complaints with the TV series. I think it's pretty much perfect. So definitely check it out if you like romance, if you like Scottish Highlands, if you like historical drama. Like, it's got it all. It's really, really amazing. So those are my top 5 underrated book to TV adaptations, but I do want to give 2 honorable mention to books that I think are adequately hyped. I'm not going to go into as much detail with these ones because you guys have probably all heard of them, but we have The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which is on Hulu. This is basically like a dystopian in a world where like the population isn't like viable, so the women that are fertile are basically given in service to the commanding men, and this is about one woman's struggle to fight against that system. And it is just so powerful and thought-evoking, and a really, really well thought out feminist piece of literature, and I love the TV show. It's on Hulu, and they even have a second season which goes beyond the end of this book. So highly recommend. And could I really do a book to TV adaptation video without mentioning Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin? I don't think so. I mean, if you haven't heard of Game of Thrones, what rock have you been living under? It's just like a giant epic fantasy taking place in the land of Westeros. We have a forgotten queen. We have just like so much political stuff going on. Like, I don't even know how to describe the series if you don't know about it, but like many books in the series. We have a Game of Thrones, a Clash of Kings, a Storm of Swords, a Feast for Crows, and a Dance with Dragons, as well as the prequel novellas, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which I've read all the Game of Thrones novels and I've not gotten to this prequel novella yet. I think Game of Thrones is one of the most popular TV shows for a reason. It is violent and vicious, and it just goes places that you don't think that TV shows would usually go, and it's crazy. I think if you are a fantasy lover, you need to watch it. And the books themselves diverge a lot from the TV show in the later books, just because the world is so sprawling in the books and there's a lot of different storylines, and it's almost too much for the amount of screen time that the show has, so they tend to like trim a lot. And the really interesting thing about Game of Thrones is that the TV show is now beyond what has been published. So the last season that just came out went into uncharted waters. One thing that I will recommend, that book that I did that was different than I would normally ever do, is I read the first book and then I forgot about it for 2 years, and then I watched the whole TV show, and then I went back and read the books, which is not something that I would normally ever do. However, I just found that the world and all the characters were so hard to keep track of. It was really great to have visuals in my mind of how things would go, and things are different enough in the book and the TV show that I didn't feel like I was totally spoiled, and I was still really surprised at some of the things that occurred in the books. So that is probably the only time that I'm ever going to recommend flipping the reading experience, or at least read the first book, then watch the TV show, and then go back and read the rest of the books. That show is probably adequately hyped. It is so fantastic, so amazing, and one of the best book to TV show adaptations of our time. I love Game of Thrones. All right, so I hope you guys liked my video about my top 5 underrated book to TV show adaptations. If you have any other book to TV show adaptations or book to movie adaptations that you love that I didn't mention, please make sure to sound off in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So have some fun, read some books, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.